Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Heart of Hospice podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode is sponsored by GrandPad. GrandPad is the all-in-one tablet designed especially for senior adults. With GrandPad, you get safe, simple video calling and photo sharing. Users can create a private family network that allows for secure photo and video sharing. The GrandPad utilizes a simple format that allows seniors to enjoy games, music, email, and more. Visit our special GrandPad website designed exclusively for the Heart of Hospice listeners at grandpad.net/THOH.
Patty Webster of the Conversation Project is my guest today, and we're talking about the Swoopers and Seagulls, who are sometimes part of caregiving. Patty Webster leads community engagement for the Conversation Project, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement's public engagement initiative to help people share their wishes for care through the end of life. Patty coaches community partners, teaches at speaking engagements, and supports the team's measurement, learning, and dissemination efforts. Since 2007, she has served as improvement advisor and faculty member at IHI, supporting community-based and healthcare system improvement efforts in the U.S., Sub-Saharan Africa, the UK, the Middle East, and Australia. You're going to love this interview today. We are talking about seagulls and swoopers. And if you're not familiar with those terms, although if you're a hospice and end-of-life worker, you probably are, seagulls are those folks who come in from out of town or away, offer their opinions, and the reason we use the word seagull is because they typically poop all over everything, and it makes things hard. In this episode, Patty is telling us about a time when she became a swooper, when she visited her dad and her sister, who is her father's primary caregiver. It shocked Patty when she realized that she was a swooper, and she ended up writing a social media post about it. That's how I became aware of the story. She had posted it on Instagram. Patty's family has also learned some lessons about starting conversations around end-of-life care, understanding what her dad's needs are when it comes to quality of life, and knowing what his wishes are. She says that knowing each other's strengths is an important component of being a successful caregiving team. So this is really a great conversation. She was very open and very generous with her personal story. So here's my conversation with Patty Webster. There's a lot to learn. Patty, welcome back to the podcast. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Helen. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me back.
This seems to be sort of our annual thing. I love it that we get together right around National Healthcare Decisions Day, but somewhere around there. And we get to talk about everything advanced care planning. I like it.
It's like chicken soup for the soul. I feel, I like that comfort food every year. I'm all in.
I like it. Well, we're going to start with a question that is about advanced care planning. It's from the Conversation Project, from one of the tools that they have. And so here's your question. It's one of those, your scale, like a scale of 0 to 5. As a patient, you would like to know, and on one end of the scale, only the basics about your condition and your treatment, or on the other side of things, all the details about your condition and treatment. So where do you fall there?
So I definitely fall on that one side of the scale where I would like to know all of the details. So the more information for me, the better. I like to kind of know what to expect, what their thoughts are, and so I can kind of make my own plans based on what the medical and clinical decisions are.
I like that. Well, we are talking today because you had an amazing Instagram post that really resonated with me, really struck home, and I think with a lot of people. You posted on Instagram about an event that made you realize you were what you call a swooper. It's what healthcare people or hospice people call a seagull, is what we call it. And it created this effect, the seagull effect, with your dad's care. Tell me about the event that caused you to make that post.
So for context, when we talked about the Conversation Project, one of the most common stories that we hear about caregiving at the Conversation Project is about the seagull effect. And so we've heard people tell us, well, I'm caring for my mom, dad, whoever the person may be, and I've got a sibling or a family member that's out of town that sometimes comes in and swoops in thinking they know best and upends plans, and basically creates a messy situation like seagulls often do, dropping their dirty work all over. And we hear about this often, and so we teach about this. And so I teach about this when I do speaking engagements. We created a short video about this. And a couple of years ago, I was visiting. So my husband and I live currently overseas. We're posted overseas. I was visiting my dad, who's back in the States, and my sister, my middle sister, cares for and lives with my dad. My dad has dementia and a liver cancer diagnosis. He had a stroke about a year ago. Yeah, actually, it's a couple of years ago. So he lost periphery vision. So he's really confined. He can walk around in his wheelchair, but he's really confined to the house because he's very unstable. And so I come in, we were visiting my dad, and I was trying to problem solve and offer to my sister what I thought was helpful advice for her while we were there. And I was like, listen, this is what we do in my work. Let me tell you a little bit about what I think. And all of a sudden it hit me like a brick that, oh my gosh, I'm the swooper. Just because I had ideas and I've heard stories from others, I felt like, oh, maybe I know best, but that is not necessarily the case. And I just, it just was surprising to me that I'm like, I can't believe that I'm actually doing what I teach people not to do.
What was your sister's response?
So, my sister at the time, I didn't say, oh my gosh, I'm the swooper, but my sister's response to what I was trying to do was kind of like, let me stop you. You're not listening to me. Let me tell you what I've done already. And that's when it hit me. And so my sister's response, because all of a sudden when I heard and realized what I was doing, I shifted my approach and I said, I'm sorry, let me hear, please tell me like what's been going on and let me hear a little bit more. And so she started shifting her approach while I shifted my approach, and we had a much better conversation about it. I actually told her about kind of my revelation. I was a swooper after the fact. So when I came home and I was actually talking to my team at work, I told them what happened. And so I called up my sister. I'm like, would you mind if I wrote about this? And would you, I know you're so busy, she's got a lot of caregiving responsibilities for my dad and also for her own care. I said, could we maybe write something about this? Because I think we could actually help others in a situation like this. And she was 100% on board with it because she knew how important it was to actually help. And so we kind of co-wrote a little bit of a story from both of our perspectives.
Very nice. I've got to ask, do you have any other siblings? or is it just
I
the
do.
two of you?
No, so there's three of us. So it's the middle sister who's taking care of my dad. I have an older sister. I'm the baby. My older sister is about 6 hours away, so she gets down at least once a month. She'll get down and see my dad and my sister. And so my visits are probably twice a year, if I'm lucky, 3 times a year. So it's a very different visit that we have. I care about and for my dad when I'm there, but I'm definitely not the primary caregiver.
Right. Right. So I'm in the same situation. I'm the youngest of three, and I am a remote caregiver for my mom. She's 92, and she also has dementia. But my brother, who's also the middle child, I would say the problem middle child. He was a mess when we were kids.
Yeah.
But he is the primary caregiver. He's retired, and he lives closest. We've sort of created this caregiving village, not with really intention and looking, in 5 years, we're probably going to have mother in a living in a place where she can get extra care. A lot of it just sort of created itself based on what was going on. Even when you try to plan ahead as a group who's providing caregiving, that can be difficult. When you and your husband decided, well, he's going to be in the military or he's going to be attached to a job where he would be moved out of the country, you didn't think 20 years ago, well, then when my dad needs care, I'm not going to be there.
Yeah. And it happens for some families really quickly. For my dad, it was a gradual decline because the dementia started first, then his lung cancer started. But you're right. We actually, my sisters and I, we're very fortunate. And it sounds like I love how you talked about your caregiving team.
Yeah.
We're really lucky in that we all get along and we get along with our parents. Some caregivers actually don't have the greatest relationship with parents or family members or those that they might be caring for.
True.
We have a very strong dynamic, but it's still you can't really prepare and plan ahead for what's going to happen in their care necessarily, but you can think about and talk about, well, what is really important with my dad, what's important to him and what matters to him. And, but we do take the responsibilities day to day because that's kind of all we can do for now because we're not sure what his health condition is going to bring the next day.
Right. A lot of this stuff is unpredictable. You can try to imagine all these different scenarios, but a caregiver can't possibly prepare or even imagine every single scenario that might happen. If you even tried to put your mind to that, how overwhelming would that be to try to prepare for every contingency? So as an out-of-town sibling, as a remote caregiver, because you're supporting, at least by email or phone or however you communicate with your sister that's the primary caregiver, what are some specific challenges that you have faced trying to support them from a distance and quite a bit of distance?
Yeah, and I think that's because it is a big difference. So we are 7 hours ahead, so we've got a time zone difference. And I think one of the biggest things challenge for me was that I felt sometimes like I'm in a black hole, that I don't know what's happening day to day. And I don't know how best to help from afar. And so my dad sleeps in the morning and doesn't wake up and get really going until midday. And so I have to wait to talk to him to see how he's doing later in my day. And I might not be at my best late at night. But also my sister's really busy too. And so she has her routine. And so I think the biggest thing for me is trying to figure out, well, how is it going? I also feel, and you might feel some of this, and those that are that remote caregiver, waves of guilt, because I get to turn it off and live my life and do my own thing, focus on work and what have you here. And so I feel guilty that I'm not actually there and helping to provide some of that day to day. And it really, my sister talks about how she chooses to be here, but even though she chooses to be there, it's still not easy. And so I know that emotional burden is something that I just feel bad about because me and my other sister, my oldest sister, we try to relieve that burden. But that's really hard because that's often my sister who's there. She talks about the day to day. It's hard to parcel out tasks when it's really getting into the weeds day to day. So I often want to offer advice to be helpful. So I try to problem solve and offer advice, but that's often really what's not needed. And so I've learned a lot about what can be helpful for her by having conversations together. So all three of us, when we get together, the three siblings, we have some really good conversations. We try to have conversations before we get together because we know how important it is to actually talk before, if we can, talk before we see my dad and see what's happening with my little sister.
So were you able to talk on the phone with your dad? He recognizes who you are and he can have a phone conversation with you?
Yeah, so he's early stage dementia. It's progressing, but we are, our conversations aren't long because obviously his memory is he's not pulling out the stories like he used to.
Right.
But he recognizes me, and we're able to have conversations and talk a little bit. It's mostly me sharing what's going on in our lives and sharing what's going on with my kids' lives. He's not remembering my kids as much because he doesn't see them as much. But we kind of remind and share story. I'll share a story. So we still are able to have that conversation. And I know the day will come. And I get sad about that, where I wonder when he's not going to recognize me. But so far, we've been lucky in that he still does. He still does remember me and my sisters.
So when it comes to remote caregiving, there's a lot of emotion tied up in there.
Yeah.
There's grief, just as if you were living 6 minutes away from your dad instead of, halfway across the world. What advice would you offer to other caregivers who are remote caregiving so that they don't come in and try to second guess? Because this is what really the seagull effect is.
Yeah.
It's a second guessing of what's being done, and I think it creates an effect with the primary caregiver that they are inadequate or they're making mistakes, or the care is just not up to snuff, or someone else is judging them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what would you tell other caregivers who are living remotely, who want to support but want to make sure that they don't create this seagull effect? Because what it comes down to, the seagulls come in and poop all over everything.
They do. They really do.
It's not
And
helpful.
It's messy.
Yeah.
No. And I think the biggest thing that we uncovered is listening, and listen some more. Like, I just can't emphasize that enough. Because you tend to want to come in and immediately jump in and say, okay, here, I've thought about this, because you're trying to help problem solve. But if you're not listening and you're telling rather than asking, you're creating what you just said. You're creating that situation where that person who is the primary caregiver may feel judged and not understood.
Mm-hmm. Get defensive.
Exactly. And at one point, my sister was telling me what was going on, and I realized I was cutting my sister off in the middle of her explanations because she was kind of going what I felt was going on and repeating herself. And I'm like, listen, I just want to cut to the chase. But I realized that she actually needed to be heard. She needed to be validated. She needed to just feel that someone was actually listening to her. And that was one of the greatest things that we and my other sister can give, is to be that active listener. Because when you come in and offer what you think is a helpful idea, you're basically putting one more thing on that already overloaded plate of the primary caregiver.
Right.
They may have already thought about it. And so we kind of shifted, and I now ask, tell me your ideas, tell me what you've been doing. And then pausing and saying, how can I help? I might have some ideas. Do you want to hear them? So don't assume that they actually want to hear that.
I like the way you say that. I might have an idea that could help.
Yeah.
So my siblings and I have gone through some of the same stuff. So we have this code that we sort of adopted when we talk to each other. He will call me and he'll say, do you have 5 minutes for me to talk about your mother? And what that means is she's doing something that he finds really frustrating. She's gotten irritated with him. She's not letting us take great care of her, which happens sometimes. And then, he'll vent to me. He'll just go on a little rant. And I'm like, yep, I hear you. Or I'll call him and I'll say, I need to talk about your sister's mother.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great system, though, like to actually have a system, because I think that's part of the challenge, is that if there's no communication, that also is when the swooper comes in, it's if they haven't heard anything or they don't know what's going on.
Right.
they feel like, okay, here's what I think. But to actually have that communication, I think that's one of the biggest things that we learned. And my sister, as a primary caregiver, realized that, like we feel if we don't have any information, we feel like we need to come in and start problem solving.
Right.
So we actually came up some, we had a system where, we mostly it's text because of the time difference. And my oldest sister is a teacher, so she's full on teaching. I mean, a teacher is 24/7. She's lesson planning, doing all sorts
Sure.
of things. We will text my middle sister, who's the primary caregiver, she used to send like audio voice messages to just try to get that quickly. Because sometimes text also you can't necessarily read context from a text. So we actually tell people, just be careful with the text because you might put your own assumptions, whether that's positive or negative, onto it. My sister, who's the primary caregiver, said, I want to keep you updated, but sometimes I just feel like that's even more of a burden to have to like sit and type a message or do an email. So we've tried to come up with ways that is a little less of a burden for her, and recognizing that, okay, we will hear from her when she's got time.
I like the audio message thing. I like that because you can hear. I like it because if my brother does something like that, he's done the same thing with us. Then I can hear his energy behind it. I can hear his frustration. If there's any emotion with it, you can kind of hear that because it got overwhelming. So my brother started doing these voice messages, and I think they're great ways. You don't have to worry about the grammar. You can just talk. You can just talk and get the information out there. I think communication probably, like you're saying, is the biggest thing when it comes to a caregiving group being successful.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to undermine the confidence of a primary caregiver when you come in and ask a lot of questions and offer a lot of suggestions. I am really hesitant because I'm the only person in my family who works in healthcare. I'm really hesitant not to second guess because my brother's more than capable of helping my mom manage her healthcare. But I think, so here's a great example in hospice. You have somebody that decides to choose hospice care for themselves, say it's a cancer diagnosis, and they've been through all the treatments and everything that they're going to do, and they've decided hospice is the best choice for them at this point in the trajectory of their disease. Then they have a family member that comes in and has seen a commercial on TV for some cancer center, 4 or 5 states away. They're doing miraculous things. If you didn't get good treatment somewhere else, you can come here and we probably have a solution for you. So they come in, they hear Uncle so-and-so has decided to have hospice care, and they come in and say, oh, do this for me. You should try. They're doing miraculous stuff here. You shouldn't give up hope. And then here's this patient, this person, and a family member who began to really doubt how much confidence they should put in their own judgment, in their own decision making.
I think you've really hit one of the biggest things that in some of the work that we do, is that part of caregiving, no matter if you're the primary, if you're the remote, if you're part of a team, is really understanding what matters to the person you all care for and care about. And that's probably, I think, one of the hardest, because we all want those that we love or we support. We want them to be around. I want my dad to be around as long as possible.
Right.
And it's really hard for us to shut off what we want for that person, and actually really understand what dad wants or what mom wants. And that asking and listening to what matters to the person in front of you, and turning off your inclination to problem solve or to have the answers, is one of the biggest things that's really hard, because it's our human nature. Is we want to help and we want people to be around.
Sure.
But I think that's one of the biggest things, is what is dad really telling us, and what is it that you really want, and why? And I think that's really important. If someone has decided to have hospice, they're telling you something. My dad, he has told us he's not a big fan of these conversations. We had to go through many iterations of having conversations with him because he does not like to talk about this at all. Like a lot of people, but my mom was the opposite spectrum. We called her the conversation queen because she would, anytime we were together, she wanted to tell us what was important to her. And it's really the values-based conversations.
Yes.
And so when we were able to get Dad to open up, he really was opening up because he was sharing stories about what he went through with his brother, what his sister, my aunt, went through with her son who had brain cancer. And so when my dad started talking about what they went through and some of those stories, he was sharing with us what he really wanted based on his values. So we knew going into some of his recent diagnoses, he had already told us that if his mind wasn't working and he couldn't have that ability, that he didn't want extra care for himself. And he shared that because of what he went through with his brother who died young. He was in his 20s when his brother died. And so, we knew, and it's not a one and done conversation. We joke at the Conversation Project that we should have been the Conversations Project, that it's an ongoing, because your wishes can change, and your wishes can change. We've had folks that have said, I don't want anything. I just want to be able to have the end of life pain-free. But also, if they've got a grandchild coming, we've heard people say, actually, I want to make sure I make it till my grandchild's birth.
Yeah,
and so
change.
give me whatever you have. And that's okay. And people need to know that your wishes can change. But I think that's one of the biggest things is if you're not really listening to the person in front of you, what they're saying, and respecting what they want, it could make the end of life really challenging for all of you. That said, though, we also know that there are families that it's not just one person making a decision. And in a lot of cultures, it's a family decision. So I think it's also really important to understand if the family dynamics, if it's a group decision, how do we make this happen? And that's something that everybody needs to talk about before hospice is needed and before an emergency situation.
Yeah. And doesn't it seem like everything always comes back to communication?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. 98% of this world's problems could be solved with better communication. Absolutely. How we talk, how often we talk, what we communicate. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And listening. And are you listening to react, or are you actually listening and absorbing?
Yes. Are you are listening to reflect? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. This conversation is so good, but we're going to take a quick break. Hang on for more great content.
If you're looking for an easy solution to stay connected to your older loved ones, GrandPad is everything you need. It's the all-in-one tablet designed especially for seniors. With GrandPad, you get safe, simple video calling and photo sharing to connect the whole family. The GrandPad utilizes a simple format that allows seniors to enjoy games, music, email, and more. GrandPad comes with 4G LTE cellular service already included, so there's no need for Wi-Fi. Users can create a private family network that allows for secure photo and video sharing. At the core of the GrandPad team are the Grand Advisors, a group of seniors that continually inspire, test, and guide the development of GrandPad. The company has built a platform that empowers seniors of all ages and technological skills to safely connect with family, friends, and caregivers. No spam, no robocalls, only connections with those you trust. The GrandPad team strives to create a world where no senior is lonely or isolated. It's the smart choice to keep older adults connected. Visit our website today at grandpad.net/THOH or call 1-888-904-4723. GrandPad, keeping seniors connected.
With me and my siblings, we've never seen a caregiving group do this before because my grandfather died the year I was born. And my grandmother died very suddenly, and she was living independently on her own. So we have never seen that modeled for us. The fact that we have been able to muddle through it so well, we each bring our own skills and talents and time, whatever we have available, to the care of my mom. It's just a fluke. I don't know how we were able to do this, but we approach it in a way that's really pretty healthy. We have some disagreements, and I think that's going to happen, right? Everybody has an idea of what quality of life should look like for their person. But for the most part, we do pretty well. And I really don't know how we got there.
Well, but you said that you have different strengths. And if you recognize that you have different strengths, I think that can be really helpful for a family team, is what are the strengths? And so my strength in our dynamic is that I help people jumpstart conversations to understand what matters to the person you're caring for. And so I said, that can be my role. I'm happy to sit down and talk about, because my dad's doctor wanted him to understand and think about a DNR. And so we sat down to talk through that with him. And I'm like, I'm happy to start. And this was a joint conversation. So my 3 sisters and I sat down with my dad. But I'm like, I'm happy to play that role. And so each, when you said, like, when you are able to maximize the skill set that each of the sibling has, and I do feel like that is really lucky, because there are a lot of families aren't as functional in that respect. And so I do feel that we're very blessed with our family in that we have that, kind of similar to what you're saying. Like we are able to play off of each other. And there's disagreements, and it's, siblings bicker.
Oh,
this is what
absolutely.
siblings do. But I think overall, like, we have a very solid way that we're doing this.
The weird thing with my siblings and I, is my mom sort of identified this in advance. She didn't have these conversations with her parents, but my mom knew that my brother should manage this and my sister should manage this, and I should be on the healthcare side of things. She just knew and I think some of it was she wanted to give each of us a role so that we didn't feel like we had been left out. But the way she assigned the different things, it works out perfectly. And I think we 3 come to the table with a respect for each other. If we had more than 3 siblings, I can't even imagine. If you've got 6 kids, how do you get everybody on the same page? But when I counsel families who are having disagreements, and this happens a lot, right? Family dynamics is a thing, right? You get enough people and then you apply a very pressure-filled situation with a grief loss. There's a lot of intense emotion. People are going to have bad reactions and they don't necessarily get along. What I tell people is, if you make a decision as a group with your person's best interest at heart, even if you bicker about it, if you get down to the indecision and you're doing it for your person based on what you know about them, you're not doing it wrong. You're not going to make a mistake, because you're listening. So any of my listeners out there, if you're part of a caregiving group right now and you're having trouble getting along, remember that each of you brings a strength, a skill, and a perspective that's needed, that's important. You don't have to agree, because you do have the one thing in common, and that is the goal of caring for your person the best way you can. And I think that's super important to remember.
I love that, Helen. And you're basically giving such good advice on giving each other grace. We talk about that, like, give each other grace. Caregiving's hard. It's hard for everyone involved, and if you've got each other's back, and just what you said, consider each other's perspectives. Every perspective is valid, and someone from the remote side might actually see things that the primary caregiver doesn't, because the primary caregiver might be really stuck in the weeds of the day-to-day. So they could bring an alternate perspective that may be helpful. And on the flip side, the primary caregiver doesn't have that luxury to actually lead the situation. So they see things on that day-to-day basis that you don't as the remote person. And it might take time to explain that what other people aren't aware of. And so as long as you recognize that, and just what you said, recognize the perspectives that everyone brings to the table.
Yeah, there's so much energy that goes into maintaining a caregiving group. I think we undervalue all the different roles, a remote caregiver, because there's a lot that a remote caregiver can do. I mean, even from where you are, so far away, you could order groceries to be delivered, to your dad and your sister if you needed to.
Yeah.
That you could do online banking, things like that. So I think we undervalue the role of a remote caregiver. But yeah, the communication, it's huge. It's huge. So when it comes to getting us all on the same page, right? It's super important. What strategies can help in dealing with these folks who do inevitably fly in as swoopers and create this seagull effect? What strategies would you recommend for dealing with these folks?
So if you're a primary caregiver, I would say just recognize that most of those swoopers who are coming in, maybe not all, but I would say most of us truly care and recognize that we do have good intentions. And so understanding and recognizing that swooper to say, listen, I hear that you want to do something. I appreciate that you really do care. And you may have to, they might not be doing something that is helpful for you. So just it goes back to what you said before, communicate and actually talk with them about what would actually help you as the primary caregiver. Recognizing that the swoopers may feel guilty. So we talked a little bit about that. So as long as you're recognizing that the swooper is doing something either out of guilt or just really caring, they care about the person there. I think if you can keep those lines of communication open as much as you can, and I know we talked about this, is before the swooper comes in, if you can jump on a call and be like, hey, let me give you an update of what's going on before you get here in person. So that person who's about to come in has an idea of what's going on with mom or dad or what the day-to-day has been looking like. And so they can actually kind of sit on that while they're flying in or driving in. So they're not coming in with a zero information. I think that can help mitigate it. And then find ways that you can get each other up to speed. So if someone comes, my sister was really big on let's get out of the house, go out for a meal. We can talk about what's happening, but also sometimes she just wanted, and she articulated, for me, just getting out of the house and not talking about caregiving and just doing something fun is going to help me. And so we know, my oldest sister and I know that that's going to be helpful. So we're all about, let's go out and get a meal and do something that's going to just take away the burden and do something really light and fun. So those are just a few things. I'm sure there's a lot more, but from our perspective.
Well, I think, again, it goes back to communication. I know one of the things that my brother does is he emails us. He'll send a report of a doctor's appointment, things like that, so that when we have a three-way call, we can ask questions just to make sure that if there are any details that we wanted to know about, not to second guess, but we also do offer, here's a suggestion, and I think we've learned to phrase it well, so it's better received. It comes across as a suggestion, not as a conviction or a criticism, but, here's a thought. Could we do this? Or can you ask the doctor about this and this? So it doesn't come across as, I think you didn't do something you should have done.
Yeah.
I would have done it
so
differently.
important.
Yeah, it really is. How we communicate, I think, makes such a difference. I love it that you guys are all about your dad.
Well, and my sister does that too. She'll send an email and copy me. We have a home health aide that does come to the house a couple days a week to help out. And if she's got something that she's dealing with the agency about, she'll copy as an FYI. And now she'll say, don't need any advice, just kind of want to fill you in. And so she's also learned, because she knows that my sister and I want to give advice. And so she says, don't need it. Or she'll say, would love your advice on this one. And so it's really clear which is for information and which is for assistance.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think she'll let you know, I got this one. I feel comfortable with it. It's working well. Yeah. But if there's a situation where she feels like she needs extra feedback, she'll go ahead and just tell you. I like it. All right, let's talk about the conversation project, or the conversations project. National Healthcare Decisions Day is coming up mid-April. What do you guys have happening this year?
Yeah, so we're excited. So every year, for those that aren't familiar with National Healthcare Decisions Day, there's a famous quote from Ben Franklin, nothing is certain in life, but death and taxes. And so we encourage people to do their taxes by April 15th and then make your healthcare decisions by April 16th. And so it is a national day where groups all over the U.S. basically help bring awareness to the importance of value-based conversations. And so we've got for the Conversation Project, we help others. It's a lot of independent organizations that do whatever they can to get the word out about the importance of conversations. We have our own social media campaign. So our theme is talk about it. And we offer everything we do is free. So we've got resources and guides. We will have a theme for each day for the week leading up to April 16th. On social media, we have the themes out in our newsletter that goes out once a month. But it's basically think about it yourself. Think about what's important to you. And share what's important to you with somebody else. So this kind of goes two ways. So before you ask somebody what their wishes are, you can share, hey, I've been trying to think about what's important to me. Let me share a little bit about this. And so it starts with you, and then we build up to make your wishes known. And so we encourage people to think about who else in your life may want this information. And so we've got all sorts of easy made social media content and pictures and images and videos that anyone can use and reshare. And so we encourage folks to get involved and share in your personal circles or wider. If you want to do something big, you can, but just encouraging one person is enough for us. And we actually suggest that if you're listening to the podcast, it's a great opener, a great icebreaker to say, I just heard this great podcast from the Heart of Hospice, and I just found out that it's National Healthcare Decision Day. Let me tell you a little bit about what's important to me. And so you can use that as an icebreaker, or you can share the podcast with someone and then ask if you can have a conversation about your wishes.
I love it. Isn't that an easier way to do it? Here's what I'm thinking about, rather than saying, I want to talk to you about when I die.
Yeah.
That's not a great conversation starter. That's
leading with death sometimes does get a little scary for people.
Yeah.
So talk about your values it's a nice way to get that conversation going.
Yeah.
And what's important to you, because really we're all about talking about what's important about life and living, and how to make that happen. And then naturally, like it can go into the conversation about what's important through the end of life.
That's perfect. Okay, so how can listeners connect with the Conversation Project and be a part of NHDD?
So I encourage you to first jump onto our website. So it's theconversationproject.org. We've got a whole host of free resources there. We've got our conversation starter guides that can help jumpstart those conversations with you and your loved ones, or those that are important to you. It may not be a loved one, it could be a friend, and it could be it's probably a chosen family member or someone that you choose to be in your circle. If you follow us on social media, so we're on Instagram, Facebook. We're not as active on X. There will be probably some activity there, but go to our Instagram page and reshare what we're sharing. If you've got a story to share, we encourage you to include it on there. And so that really just go on our website is the quickest way to see what's happening and get the resources that you might need.
Perfect. Patty, thank you so much for being back on the show today. It was great to have you with me.
Thank you so much. And it's just a pleasure to hear also about your story and what you all are going through as your family caregiving. And so I just wish you all well.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes, and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.